we have a special guest today who is Fabiola Creed, and she is a research associate at our Center for the Social History of Health and Healthcare at Strathclyde. She is with us this semester, and she'll be talking to us about her PhD research, which she did down in Warwick. So her PhD was on the topic of the history of the sunbed industry and tanning. And so we're going to talk to her today about her research and how it relates to media and to body image, which again is our topic to this week. So hi, Fabi, and thanks for joining us.
Hey, thank you.
So you have a very interesting topic for your dissertation. Tell us a little bit briefly about it, and how and when did sunbeds come about? Just a briefer on the history of tanning and sunbeds in the UK.
So if we go way back into the actual 1890s, a physician and phototherapist actually discovered the ultraviolet ray technology first by accident. So for the first few decades from then, from the 1890s, it became sort of medicalized and was used to cure TB, rickets, and several other sort of skin conditions. But it seemed to gain popularity, shifting from medical spaces into commercial spaces, getting these beautifully wooden casketed kind of sun lamp boxes in the 1930s. And then it was only in the sort of 1960s that these little boxes sort of got bigger, and then there's all increasing sort of like glamorization, off-tanned skin from more disposable income, air travel becomes cheaper, there's more leisure time spent outdoors, and also the boom of beauty and health salons where they want all these exciting technologies to enhance health. But it's actually in 1978 that the actual term sunbed starts to properly emerge, and suddenly the sort of smaller sunray, solarium and solaria technologies have turned into great big full body sized units. This became really successful as an industry because it coincided and linked in with the health club boom. So basically the equivalent of like a gym. So gym culture and sunbeds are sort of united as the sunbed was introduced as something that you could use before, after going to the gym to release your muscle tensions. So you got these full body size units, and then more revolutionary technologies in sort of 1993 with the tanning shop, which I think is still around today, introduces sort of like a horizontal stand-up one, which isn't as time consuming. And now they sort of resemble little mini spaceships with loads of different technological features. So
That's fascinating. So the sunbed has evolved greatly.
Yes, it has.
Decades. Yes, okay. And you specifically research the term Tanorexia. Tell us what that term means.
So the actual term Tanorexia, so it was kind of colloquially circulated in America in the 1980s, but it was first introduced officially by actually a psychiatrist in Glasgow in 1991. And from what I realised of looking at the stereotyping of sunbed consumers, before this period in the late 1980s, a lot of the sort of entertainment media wanted to frame new working class consumers. So basically when they were first introduced, it was seen as sort of like an upper class consumption. Sunbed use was seen as like a rational moral activity, and the sunbed units were like beautifully designed and framed as sort of like very British. But then working classes wanted access of this technology, so they hired, there's actually one company, or emerging company, that hired one of these expensive sunbeds, looked at how they could break it down and get cheaper bulk components, and then mass produced it. And then suddenly it was accessible for everyone by the late 1980s. And then as soon as that started happening, there was sort of this emerging stigma and stereotyping of working class consumers. And the sunbed became like a really strong symbol, always put in the background or incorporated in the daily activity to show that young women are sort of like harming themselves with their increasingly sort of disposable income or their sort of emerging financial independence. So yeah, that's when the term tanorexia started to sort of emerge. It framed working class consumers and young women for indulging and showing sort of excessive tanning behavior and so on.
And does this relate to like getting addicted even to excessive tanning, or it's more of a casual just use of the term?
So yeah, there was, through the sort of media, after a few years of the immoral consumer being shown, the actual term said that it was a psychological, and now it's said as like a physiological addiction to the actual tanning, where they get sort of withdrawal symptoms and dependency because the UV reacts with the skin. But then it sort of gets compared to smoking, so like nicotine or like, tobacco dependency, alcohol, and then also ties in sort of like anorexia and so on. So it's said to be an actual genuine addiction. But yeah, I have my own perspectives, which probably contradict that.
Okay. And what is the role of the media in all this? So probably the media plays a big role in this, in the whole trend, in the term, in just fanning the fire, if you wish, on this trend.
Yeah, so what I find really fascinating about this case study, instead of smoking, alcohol, and other illegal drugs, is that the media actually led and created the stereotype of the tanorexic. So first in entertainment media, so yeah, the framing of working class, young, vain, immoral members of society, then became framed as sort of bimbos, Barbies, gold diggers, and later stepmothers through entertainment media. And you can see this in national print press coverage, then it turns into radio shows, then interactive television shows, cartoons, and later films. So if you look at Cinderella Story from 2004, the evil stepmother sort of, is shown as kind of like a tanorexic, using her luminant pink sunbed in her back garden. And and then the Daily Mail, and mainly the female page, which is a huge provider of information. I mean, they reach about 1.5 to 2 million readers each year, and have done so since the late 1970s. Constantly were sort of showcasing these tanorexic profiles, where they're kind of like framing these women, but then women were actually would later come forward, sort of conforming to this stereotype. So yeah, the media is hugely influential in creating the tanorexia stereotype.
And how does tanorexia and this whole obsession with tanning, you said in the beginning that it was a very British thing. How does that, first of all, this is outside of maybe what we're planning to talk about, but I really got intrigued by that. Why do you say that it's a British obsession? And second, how does all this relate to body image?
So British obsession, I'd say, sort of two parts. For a start, it's not exactly sunny outside. And actually the weather had a huge influence on the success of the sunbed industry. Like, it just happens that in the 1980s were the worst, most rainiest, most grim grey summers that they'd had for years. But also I think the creation of tanorexia in Britain relates to sort of wider political, economic and social cultural tensions and changes as well. So I think because of Thatcher in the 1980s, working class people had a lot more opportunities, were giving sort of small loans and so on. And then there's a backlash against sort of Thatcher in the late 1980s, and they were sort of framed as sort of immoral, excessive, consuming, not very good sort of like role models of society in British culture. And then also the creation of tanorexia kind of coincides again with young women getting a lot more access to jobs and better sort of financial opportunities. And suddenly with all this money, because they've always been told that their body image is the most important thing, they're spending all this money on beauty and health technologies and products, which goes against the role of the traditional role of what women should be spending their money on, which is the kids, the household, the husband. And yeah, related to the framing or like the sort of addiction narrative off body image, I'm okay with the fact of it saying that sort of like it's an addiction or that it's going to be harmful, but like I feel uncomfortable with the stigma behind the framing of saying that beauty consumptions are addictive and excessive, because it's always sort of fixing women. You know, they're the ones buying these and using these products related to body image, and it's got that kind of like historical British stigma behind that kind of loosely answers. Yeah.
But do you have a feeling of like what, I mean, I feel like from my research on body image, the ideal body is definitely seen as one that is tanned to a certain extent, maybe not excessively tanned to show a problem, but not pale white in any way.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about even the ideal beach body, because there's research on the beach body as well, which is a very big concept in itself, especially, you know, right about springtime, going into summer and everything, everyone starts talking about their beach body and how to achieve that. And a big part of achieving the perfect beach body is actually getting the tan for it, right?
Yeah, and actually there has been a lot of studies saying that people are quite biased towards people with a tan. So there's been studies saying that people are more likely to be successful in an interview if they have a slight tan, because apparently it sort of reflects wealth or athleticism kind of thing, or that they are more sociable because they go outside and they're more interactive and sort of open-minded, and yeah, which is ridiculous. But I think yeah, in addressing these problems of body image and framing tanning as sort of like addiction, as sort of like addictive, I think instead of marking women saying that they're excessive and addicted, it'd be better to look at the wider infrastructure of why there's these perspectives. So yeah, looking at the commercial pressures, which are sort of like forcing women to want like a sort of tanned body, and then also trying to like educate better ideals off body image, so people are a lot more aware of their bias of when they look at a body, whether the body's got tattoos or they are deemed, or like socially culturally deemed as sort of like fat, because there's always this sort of morality and stigma associated towards them and their value, and that often for women actually does have material costs or political costs, whether they get the job or not, or whether they're going to be accepted in a society, or etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's actually similar research to what you just cited that talks about that people who are overweight end up earning a lot less over their lifetime than people who are not. And we're not talking about coming from deprived areas and earning less, but just a matter of not being hired for top jobs as a result of just looking the way they look, which doesn't conform to society ideas of weight in that case, but obviously of tanning as well. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. We'll keep this short.